Hello, everybody. Let's get started. We have a lot to cover, so we can get going. Thanks for coming out on a Saturday morning. Is everyone here for the Environment and Sustainability panel? Yeah. I accidentally went to the business panel before this one because I thought it was in that room. I remember when the iPhone first came out in the summer of 2007, I waited in line at the AT&T store to see it. And it was the same summer that Harry Potter 7 was coming out. And after a few hours, an AT&T person came out and went up and down the line and said, "You're all here for the iPhone, right?" And this woman in front of me said really loudly, "iPhone? I thought this was Harry Potter." So since then, I've always tried to make sure people are, in the right place. But I think she was joking because she stuck around. So I'm really excited about this panel this morning. Speaking of the idea of figuring out if you're in the right place, I think that's kind of the whole idea of this panel. And because we have 6 really great Brown alums, and they really run the spectrum, and I actually tried to sit them across the spectrum. So down that end we have nonprofits, and then we work our way towards kind of activism and organizing and policy to CSR, and then entrepreneurship, startups, if I can label you that, Tom, and then finance. So I think it's a good representation of the fact that environment and sustainability means a whole lot more than I think it has in the past. And in some of the calls I did with these panelists to prepare, they were saying things like, sustainability is actually about rethinking literally every sector that's out there and every job that's out there. And successful sustainability means today also kind of marrying business principles with environmental goals as well, I think. And that's something we can debate a little bit, but hopefully will be a core theme throughout the panel. I think the other core themes that I hope you'll pay attention to today are one, just getting a sense of what's the breadth of options that are out there, because I think when you're a student, speaking from my own experience, because I'm a senior at Brown, you can, especially if you're interested in issues of sustainability, really quickly get bogged down in the huge range and severity of problems that are out there, and not really think about the amazing solutions and the really great work that is being done day by day by people like those on this panel. So that's one key theme of the panel, is kind of what do you want to do? And then I think there's a really important component as well, which is the how, right? So typically, I think in jobs and internships, people think of how as how do you get a job? How do you get an internship? But there's also, I think, kind of a deeper component of the how, which is how do you want to live your life? And how do you want to approach decisions about where you're going to spend your future? And then once you get there, how do you want to interact with your coworkers? How do you want to pursue your work in ways that's grounded in your values and moving you towards your goals? And this is something that came up over and over again while I was talking with each of these panelists in preparation. And I think it's something that we're going to explore a lot today. So maybe to start off, we can just get a quick sense of who is in the room. So could you raise your hand if you are a freshman, please? Okay. Raise them high. Okay. Cool.
Don't be ashamed.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. You all have to leave. Sophomores? Okay, great. Juniors? And seniors? Okay. Yeah, pretty good. Okay, and what about concentrations? How many of you are doing environmental studies or science? Okay, and what are some of the other concentrations here? BEO, geology. What was that? Econ. Okay. Materials engineering. Chemistry, American studies. Urban studies. Okay, great. Awesome. Well, I guess to kick it off then, I'm going to start. We can, I guess, start with you, Rachel, and then work our way across. And we'll kick things off just with a quick introduction from each panelist. I asked them to share one. We're going to try and keep this really short, at least for the intro, because I know there are a lot of questions that I want to pose to them and questions from all of you. So just one sentence about what they did at Brown, one sentence about what they do now, and then one sentence if they can distill down like a pretty crucial piece of career advice to share with you. Then we'll go back after the intros and start to delve into these things.
Okay. My name is Rachel Miller. I co-founded Rosali Project for a Clean Ocean. We're an ocean conservation organization working on marine debris, about to launch into overfishing. And I hold many, many roles. At Brown was a significant experience for me because of the lack of academic boundaries and not being forced to fit into paths or boxes or anything like that, and the ability to take some risks with courses and independent studies and things like that. And my advice in the big picture is to take advantage of opportunities that give you the chance to get dirty, sandy, salty, and muddy, figuratively or literally. It's kind of literal in that. And to fully embrace it. And it may not be what you want, that's okay, but to take advantage where you have the chance to really get into careers or paths that you're interested in.
Hi, my name is Scott Wolf. I'm executive director of an organization here in Rhode Island called Grow Smart Rhode Island. And we're a nonprofit policy, research, and advocacy group that's focusing on how to develop a stronger and sustainable Rhode Island economy. And we focus on urban redevelopment, improving our transportation system, and protecting our rural and farming areas, which, believe it or not, are a majority of the state, second most urbanized state in the country, but a lot of forest and farm as well. What I did at Brown, even though I'm a little older than some of the other folks around here, I still snuck in after the new curriculum had been established, and I took advantage of it. I did some independent study work, including getting some credit for a political campaign I worked on. I did a poll in connection with that campaign that resulted in a summer job for me in Washington, D.C. with a political polling firm, and kind of launched me on my career in promoting progressive causes and politicians through research and strategy. Advice. I think you're all smart, analytical people, or you wouldn't be here. But listen to your heart as well as your head when you're making decisions about where you want to work and who you want to work with, because that's as important as analyzing stuff to death. Thanks.
Hey guys, my name is John Hua. I'm an environmental organizer with Green Corps. I work right now in Wilmington, North Carolina on a bill related to the clear cutting of southern old growth forests. While at Brown, I mostly worked for BOLT, the outdoor leadership training group, as a mentor and leader, and also was in Pirates, the a cappella group. And my advice to you guys would be, well, one, I'm clearly younger than everyone here, so I'd love to field any questions on figuring out your first job and stuff like that. But also to think about when you're looking at jobs, I thought a lot about how I'd like to spend my day to day. And I chose organizing mostly because I love working with people, and I love having change move, or kind of working with communities to impact change.
Great. Hi, I'm Sophie Rifkin, and I just started a new job in December, and I work as a corporate sustainability consultant. So we work with leading companies on their sustainability strategies. While I was at Brown, I was a English major. So if there's any English majors out there, you too can work in the sustainability field. And I was also very involved in dance while I was here. I'm going to cheat and do two quick words of wisdom, and these are probably more on the kind of technical side, I guess. But I think that you should never underestimate the power of networking and speaking to people in fields you think you're interested in, as well as fields you're not sure that you're interested in. And I think related to that is always write thank you notes. It sounds trivial, but most people out there don't think to do that. saying thank you, following up with people is really the best way to keep your network growing and to keep people remembering you as well.
I'm Tom Pinsons. I'm the president and CEO of Digital Lumens. We make smart LED lights, which means we use sort of the inevitable illumination technology of the future, put small computers and network into each of them so they decide when and where to turn on and save incredible amounts of energy, plus give you a lot of information about what's happening inside a building. At Brown, I was a neuroscience major. I ended up there after 3 or 4 other majors, and did a lot of research and then went to graduate school before I ended up becoming an entrepreneur. While here, I also was on the production workshop board and spent a lot of time actually teaching sign language, which was an area I never thought I'd end up. I also continue to be involved with Brown. I'm one of the founding board members of the entrepreneurship program here. And so I've probably seen some of you at some of those events, and plus spend some time on the actual community around academic commuting and IT to find out a way to do distance learning and help you get more wireless in the dorms. I think, first of all, just a comment on the networking. My only one concrete piece of advice around networking is you should leave Brown with 500 LinkedIn connections. Most of you probably have 100. So you've got a lot of work to do. The second one is that I always think there's opportunity in chaos. The idea that you're trying to find your trajectory could be this very nice slope. You're trying to create angles in your career. Sometimes people do that through business school. Sometimes do that because someone takes a risk on them for mentorship. The other is running towards trouble. So if you see a troubled industry, a troubled department, a troubled company, there's usually opportunity where battlefield promotions happen and you can get opportunities to do things based on your potential and not your experience.
Hello, my name is DR. I graduated Brown in 2008. I work for a company called Vision Ridge Partners. We're a sustainable, broadly investor. So we invest both in companies and in real assets all across the clean tech spectrum, whether that's solar, energy efficiency, wind, biomass, whatever you name it. At Brown, I was a political science major. I was on the ski team and head of an organization that I have no idea if it's still around, but called the Brown Policy Review. My one piece of advice, sort of, I just maybe piggybacking a little bit on what Tom said, but is don't be afraid to take risk. You're going to come across in life very many situations where there's a nice, easy path that's going to look good on your resume, and there's going to be a much more challenging, interesting, harder to figure out that may not look good from a brand name perspective on your resume, but that is going to teach you a lot more. I've gone that second route most recently in my career and haven't looked back, and it's been awesome. So I'd recommend that.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I think this the theme of networking is definitely going to come up a bit, and hopefully we can talk more about that later on. This past summer, I was lucky enough to intern with DR in Colorado, so I promise no conflict of interest. I'm still going to be really tough on him. But halfway through the summer, we had like a kind of summer goals check-in, and how am I doing on the things that I'd hoped to learn? And DR said to me, Brett, how do you think building your network's going? And I said, I think it's going pretty well. I've been meeting a lot of interesting people. I've been having conversations with them. I think things are great. And he said, Brett, you haven't added a single person on LinkedIn since you started here. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I've added at least one. But so clearly some people are huge believers in LinkedIn, for better or worse. For better, excuse me. So to start, I'm going to pose a question to Sophie and Scott. And the question is thinking about all the different ways in which you might be contributing to the field of environmental careers and working on sustainability. Why are you where you are right now instead of somewhere else?
Okay, all right. I'm not sure, to be really candid, I'm not sure I'm where I am because of a very strategic, systematic thought process. But I'm glad I'm where I am. And one of the things I like about what I do is that it's multi-issue. It's pretty holistic. We're trying to, and we're also trying to change the predominant development pattern that's existed in Rhode Island and in the U.S. for the last 60 or 70 years, which has been an auto-centric suburban sprawl kind of development pattern. And there are some market forces and demographic trends that are kind of wind at our back now, promoting more urban investment and urban living and more land preservation. So I feel like I'm in a young, interesting movement, and the one that's, when I started just 16 years ago in this enterprise, that's, I guess, not just 16 years ago, but we were kind of viewed as utopian and as a little bit unrealistic, and now we're right in the mainstream and being listened to, so that's exciting.
So I'm on my 5th job since graduating, and I graduated in 2007. And so I've worked, and not because I got fired, although I did get laid off from one of them in the middle of the recession. But I say that only just to sort of, not to go into all of those jobs, but I left Brown and I worked in really dry business research consulting. I then did corporate sustainability consulting the first time. I then spent 3.5 years working at George Washington University in their newly formed sustainability department. I then sold seafood for a sustainable seafood company, and now I'm back doing corporate sustainability work. So I say that only because I have worked on the issue of sustainability in a variety of different contexts and settings. And I think for me, while on a sort of resume, if you just sort of read those job titles out, you might think, wow, this person is all over the place. I think that what for me, the narrative thread has always been, when I graduated Brown, I really felt that my way to impact change and make a difference was I wanted to work with large institutions, be they universities, companies, governments, to drive change. And for me, that change was around sustainability. I don't come at this work from an environmental science or more technical background. I've learned that content. But for me, I come from the English major, communications side of this. And I think that I really view sustainability work is around being a change maker and learning how to navigate large institutions, figure out how to build relationships, figure out how to get the grumpy facilities guy to do what you want him to do. They're not all grumpy, but the ones that I've had the pleasure of working with sometimes are. And I think that really requires a really great communication skill set and the ability to see positivity when others don't. But I think that that's what's really wonderful about sustainability work, is that you can work on it in the nonprofit sector, the for-profit sector, government, in direct service. But for me, my sort of North Star was that I really liked working in large environments and working to sort of, turn the ship 1 degree. And all of the potential of change that can come from that.
Thanks. Along those lines of thinking about what are you working towards, my next question is for John and Rachel. What are you working towards? So you decided to be in this field, and where are you headed, and what are your goals long term?
So I chose to be an organizer, to work in politics at the kind of grassroots level, because I think I got interested in environmental studies. I didn't say what I studied. I studied international relations and comparative literature at Brown. But I got interested in climate change and the fight to move our energy systems towards a more sustainable path in college, especially through the divestment fight here. And I see working on moving us towards a more sustainable future as a fight that needs to be won in terms of people and politics, not science and business, and a lot of the institutions that that we see have already been convinced of this and are producing reports on this or funding renewables, all amazing things, but we are kind of at a hitch point where last week 50% of our senators don't believe that climate change is man-made. So I was inspired by that because one, I wanted to work where I thought I could make the most difference, which is in communities and really pushing people towards legislation that moves us towards a sustainable future. But also, I just loved working with people. So I chose to do organizing because I thought about my day-to-day, and I'd been interning on Capitol Hill as a staffer, with staffers, and I had just gotten so bored with working with like political reports and doing things like that, and really was finding inspiration from the work I was doing on the side, organizing. So yeah.
So can you hear me at this volume? We started Rosalia Project because we went to a really dirty, gross beach when we were on vacation. And my husband and I had both been sailors. I was on the sailing team here, and the common thread of all my many experiences was the ocean or water or lakes. So Rosalia Project started really because we were at a place of reevaluating. I had my own business, a for-profit business, teaching kite surfing and snow kiting and using underwater robots to take people on shipwreck tours. And it was fun, but it wasn't really a great business. It wasn't my forever business. So Rosalia Project started with this dirty beach and the realization that we wanted to do something about it, that we could do something about it. And so now our goals on the broad side are impact. So clean up, actual cleaning up the ocean for real, and also the education that it's going to take to prevent reaccumulation of trash in our ocean. When I say ocean, I mean every piece of water on the planet that will eventually drain to the ocean, so rivers and lakes are included. And impact and inspiration, I guess, are the best ways, our ultimate goals here. Impact to the planet, to the ocean, and inspiration to all the people on it, or as many people as we can possibly reach. And we're on the front end of our organization. We're just entering our 5th year of operations, and that's what we're after. We're after big, like 350.org, fill up New York City with people who all believe in the same thing level of big. I'm not sure exactly how we're gonna get there, but it's been done before, so those are our goals.
Okay. So I think those are generally goals shared by most people on the panel. But maybe we can think about maybe ways of thinking about sustainability that are a little bit different. And so my next question is for DR and Tom, who are definitely in the private sector side. And I'm wondering, what's something that you believe about sustainability that maybe not everyone in the room agrees with? And I'm sure you guys have pretty complicated answers to this, but definitely trying to delve deeper than the simply, what's good for, like, we need solutions that are both profitable and sustainable.
Go. All right. So that's a good question, Brett. I think when I came out of Brown, I was passionate about the environment, wanted to go in business, looked around, really only found stuff that ticked one of those two boxes. I could either sort of go into the policy activism nonprofit world on the environment side, or I could go into business. Decided to go in business, but would have loved to have combined the two. Knowing what I know now, there's lots of opportunities to combine the two, and I actually have come pretty far in my understanding of how the world works, and think that you really need to unleash the capital markets to affect real change. So the organizations that Sophie's talking about, moving in 1 degree, people are motivated by money. Like, that's sort of the for better or worse, the truth. You have to convince people that this is a profitable endeavor to be able to force them to change. They're not going to change out of the good of their hearts, the large majority. And this is a large problem, tragedy commons type problem, where there aren't enough people working on it. So to the extent that you can work on it, to the extent that you can convince others that this is worth working on, whether that's through the policy NGO or business side, I think that's a useful endeavor. And I firmly believe that you have to get the capital markets, the really big banks, the $1 trillion investors, to be making these decisions to change the focus from coal and carbon-based energy to sort of freer and more sustainable types of energy. Does that sort of answer your question, Brett?
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
So This is my third growth company. I ended up in sustainability by mistake. The other ones were network security and voice and video over the internet. And I had a venture capitalist who called me up and said, there's this cool thing called LEDs, you want to take a look at it. And for me, it was really about working with really great people and seeing an inevitable market shift. It was only by mistake that it turns out that that has a huge impact on the nations and the world's use of electricity. Our customers primarily are these grumpy facility managers that we hear about. These are guys that show up at work wearing red wing boots and Carhartts and drive pickup trucks. And they're grumpy for a reason. They've got very hard jobs. They work in very hard environments. But these are the same guys who put the cans in the back of the pickup truck and drive it home to a recycling center. So they're a very broad perspective. And so what you need to do, I think, in this world is try to meet people where they are and try to convince them using language they understand and don't try to create huge tectonic plate shifts in the way they think about the world. I think we are in a fundamental problem with the fact that, as we said earlier, that half the senators don't believe in climate change. Some of us spend time trying to argue with those folks. But let me just read you a quote from Max Planck that I usually think about when I'm confronted with these folks and try to figure out if they're just stupid or selfish or malicious. And so you folks who may know who Max Planck is, but he said, a scientific truth does not triumph by convincing his opponents and making them see the light, but rather because his opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up that's familiar with it. Those guys are gonna die, you're the new generation.
Okay, so,
Can I say something from the other side of the table?
Please.
Just to say that I actually really think that that side of the table is extraordinarily important. And that there are people who are investing in for-profit enterprise here because, so for example, we're just entering a partnership where we're going to take the plastic stuff that we take off the beaches this summer and we're going to give it to a company called Bionic Yarn. Now, Bionic Yarn is a fully for-profit company who needed high-level investment from a company hopefully like yours. And they're going to turn it into stupidly expensive clothing for Pharrell's G-Star Raw for the Oceans line. But that's okay, because it's taking our ocean trash and putting it into a stream that's driving things along. And if you can go out and afford a kind of a cute t-shirt with this funky little octopus guy, but on it for $75, I looked. You will still, it's still part of the loop. It's still part of an important element of the environment. And that's coming from the person on the left side of the table.
yeah, perfect. Okay, so your options basically are you can either convince people that sustainability makes sense, or you can wait for them to die, or you can sell them really expensive clothing. So now, I think we can kind of just end there.
Yeah.
We have a sense of the
You all know
crews
what
that
to
are
do
out there.
now.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so just to pause for a moment, if you ask yourself kind of how is this going, am I learning what I was hoping to learn or getting a sense of what I was hoping to see, can you give me like an honest, thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle? Honestly, okay. Okay, well, mostly thumbs up, so that's a good thing. Just to mix it up a little bit, can we get a question from someone out there, something that you'd like to hear, and you can pose it to the panel as in its entirety, or one or two or three panelists specifically. Yeah.
I was kind of wondering, like, how you entered your specific fields. Is it just through networking, or was it through like cold applying, or was it just like out of the network?
Networking.
I basically left Brown, went to MIT, science major, and halfway through discovered that I was inadvertently on a path to become a professor. And so I quit that job and basically convinced someone that I knew how to program a Macintosh, which at the time I really didn't. So about taking risks and sort of trying to reach outside the potential, that was how I got there, and just continue to find mentors and take risks along the way, and able to start a few companies.
Networking, and LinkedIn as the tool for that. But I mean, just to give you an example, the job I have now, which I just started, as I mentioned. So I worked with a woman at my last job who had a friend who wanted to speak to someone I knew on LinkedIn who did sustainability at McDonald's. So I connected her to my friend at McDonald's. And then a couple months later, I reached out to that girl and said, hey, remember I helped you connect with my friend at McDonald's? Can you talk to me about what you do now? And she said, sure. And then 4 months after that, there was a job position at her firm, and she told me about it. But I also, when I was a couple rounds into the interviews and felt like I needed like a good word put in, I had my old boss see who she knew at the place I was interviewing and put in a good word for me. So that was many layers of using my network. So yes, now it could have just been having info interviews with someone who worked there, but it's also thinking about how can you get your name in front of the right people. I firmly believe HR portals are where resumes go to die. And so that sounds scary, I know, but I think you have to apply the traditional channel, but you really have to get someone to put your resume on top of the pile, and that's through networking.
Yeah, actually, it sounds weird, but 2 years out it was networking, both for my own personal kind of decision to go into what I wanted to do, but also helped me get the job that I have. I found out, I kind of realized while working in DC, in particular on Capitol Hill, that like a lot of the people that I was inspired most by or working on the side organizing a divestment campaign in DC or various other things with had done Green Corps or had worked as an organizer in the past, especially when they were right out of college. And that helped me both learn that I wanted to apply to that and probably got me a good word, but I don't know that.
There's a couple different ways I can answer the question. Certainly networking was very helpful in my getting this position. I mean, kind of what I had done before this position was helpful in getting the position also. But I was jogging one day with a friend of mine here in Providence while I was still working in DC during the week for this congressional accountability project I was running. And I was telling him that I was sick of having a commuter marriage and that I wanted to come back to Rhode Island, and are there any significant progressive public policy leadership opportunities in the state? He said, there's this new organization getting going called Grow Smart Rhode Island, and maybe you ought to look into that, and here's who you should call, and that was it.
So for me, it wasn't networking, it was risk-taking, risk-taking, risk-taking. I graduated from Brown and tried out for the Olympics in sailing, but didn't make it. Went to, ran a community sailing center in Burlington, Vermont that just opened, so like between the ice seasons. Although that turned out to be great, I realized I didn't want to work for so many people, the board of directors. Great people, but so many of them. And
I have a 34-person board.
we've got a 6-person board, and I'm one of the members now. And then I started my own for-profit business, knew that was never going to be the end of it, and then started Rosalia Project. So I came to my path, I suppose, somewhat 2 feet in and jumping off of things stubbornly. Some successful, some not so much.
Yeah, and maybe we can just flesh this out a little bit more with stories from DR and John, because I know you both, John, when you graduated, I think, and then DR after your first job took risks in leaving kind of established positions to find something ambiguous that you hoped would be better.
Yeah, I was interning on Capitol Hill, and there was like kind of the expectation that you go from that to a staffing role. I took a leap because I just knew that what I was doing day to day was not what I wanted to be doing, and I saw people that were content in doing that, and I was like, I think they should have this role, And exactly, and I was getting inspiration from work that I was doing outside of my day to day, my 40, 50 hour week, which was organizing a divestment campaign in DC and working on various other things, I just started questioning, I'm so young, I should be following where my passions lie. So I took that leap.
So it's sort of a similar story. I was working, as I mentioned before, in consulting after Brown. Really like that. Consulting is problem solving for people who've been successful in their careers, and you're helping them solve a new problem that they are not equipped or don't have the time to solve themselves. So it's fun, it's interesting. You work hard, you work with really good people. But at the end of the day, after too many nights at 2, 4 a.m., whatever, sort of like, man, I just do not care if I help AT&T or Verizon make another $5. I don't fucking care. And so left that after about a year and a half, knowing that I was super passionate about this whole environmental thing, but didn't know how to do that. So I did a bunch of networking, and ended up meeting a guy through my old boss who said, hey, you should meet this guy. He's sort of CEO of a car company. I was like, I don't really want to be a car guy. Met the guy, he's like, I don't really want to be a car guy either. So he ended up wanting to be a investor. He had spent a decade at a hedge fund in Boston and had left that because he was passionate about the environment and wanted to invest in stuff that was not just to make money, but to invest in ways of helping the environment. So he moved to Boulder and said, hey, if you want to move to Boulder, you have a job. And I said, I'll give it a year. 1 year's turned into 4+, so that's take risks.
Okay, another question from all of you.
So I'm wondering, and this is for any panelists who's inspired to answer, if there are any specific moments in your careers or aspects of the job you're on now that really make you feel like you're affecting change in that situation.
I'd say I've had a few. I worked for past governor of Rhode Island in the early 1990s, and part of my job was to be his liaison to federal agencies and our congressional delegation. And one of his initiatives was to create a health insurance program and health care system for low-income women and their kids. It's called Right Care. It's in place today. And we needed to get waivers from the federal government in order to establish that program. And I was quite involved in getting the waivers from the Department of Health and Human Services. And it's nice going forward 20, 25 years to see that this program is serving, I think, more than 100,000 Rhode Islanders who really need this kind of assistance. So that's the kind of thing that keeps me going.
When I worked at GW, which was probably to date the best job that I've had. Universities are really wonderful places to work. And side plug, I went to grad school for free, which you might not know if you work at some universities. That's a huge benefit. So, but while working there, I worked with a really wonderful student group that was doing a lot of really great work around food on campus. And they were planting a garden on campus. It was the first project I was assigned when I worked there. There was all this red tape, because it was technically city space, and so it was on public property, and so none of the plants could be more than 3 feet, and you couldn't have permanent structures, but we didn't know what that meant. But it was, over 3 years, we helped them write a grant proposal. They won $20,000 to expand the garden. I was down in DC a couple months ago and drove by it, and the garden is thriving and flourishing. And it became, I think, with sustainability projects, especially in that kind of university setting, we really needed a focal point project. Sure, it was a small garden. It wasn't, changing anything in a really kind of huge, major way. But it was a project everyone always highlighted. Here's, here's what a success story can look like when you get all of the right players together and figure out how to make something like that, happen. And so I think that for me, it was just also really inspiring to work with students who were so dedicated and so motivated, and to also see how we could rally staff and faculty and community members around this project as well.
Let me minor, probably smaller, that and probably focus on individuals. When I did my first startup, it was a good success during the first internet boom, and we sold it and everyone did well, and the wife of one of my employees came up to me and said, thank you for the stock that we sold to this large company allowed us to buy our home. So I thought my job was to help you get rich. But I think it's changed a little bit here at Digital Lumens. I think we've ended up tapping 2 employee bases that I've never spent as much time with. The first one may be the one that's obvious to you, which is interns. About 10% of our employee base has started as an intern. And usually we hire 1 out of every 4 interns that works with us, and we have a dozen at any given point in time working with us, and that's 100 people, so we have a lot of interns. It's more about what they can do for us than what we can do for them, so we look, one of the rules, if you're looking for an internship, don't talk about why you want to be there, but what you can do for the company. The second is we, over 10% of our workforce is ex-military veterans, and that's probably not represented very highly here in this group, but that's a part of the nation's workforce that is underrepresented, and I feel that the effect I've had on individuals, either who are starting their careers from internships or trying to make a transition from serving our country, has been really inspiring to the folks who work with us and really rewarding for me.
I've got a couple, but I'll just tell you 1.5. Actually, I've got a lot. What we do, I think, where we are, there's a lot of, we get in there, and so we can see results quickly. But one of them is that, so I live in Vermont after Hurricane Irene came and basically wiped away the middle of the state. It did a lot of damage to infrastructure and everything, and it took a lot of trash and just flung it all over the rivers and into Lake Champlain. So we teamed up with the Vermont Department of Labor, and they had money from FEMA. And we put 41 people who lost their homes or jobs because of the flooding, or who were at the end of their Department of Labor benefits, to work for 6 months cleaning up public spaces, and collecting data on the trash that we were picking up throughout rivers and along the lake shore that were affected by the flooding. And that was, we were hiring people who couldn't read because of developmental disabilities, or just hadn't had a lot of opportunities with a good wage for a while. It wasn't permanent, but it was for a while, and those people not only sort of learned about this bigger problem, but they made a difference to the state, these public shared places that were covered in trash. We picked up over 500,000 pieces of trash, including 2,000 tires that had been washed into one of our rivers, and that was pretty crazy and very gratifying for us. And then the other is we use underwater robots to connect people with their underwater world, and they've got claws and we clean up trash. And we do that with education programs. So we had kids, and it's always pretty fun and rowdy. And one time we were picking up trash in the Charles River. It's disgusting. The visibility is terrible, but it's just never ending. And the kid, about halfway through, like an 8-year-old standing behind me, screams in my ear, "This is like a treasure hunt for the environment." And I was like, oh, you're so hired. But it was clear that they got it. And even that little snippet of a moment is worth all the other hard work being into it.
Okay, I have a question for John and Scott. I guess our kind of bookends on the chronological spectrum. And I had sent everyone some.
It's just a number. And a little hair change.
I sent all of our panelists some questions ahead of time. One of them was, how do you think your time at Brown prepared you or not for what came after and for your career? And I'm going to amend that slightly and say, how did it prepare you, and also how did it not? So you actually have to answer both those questions.
You want to go?
That's yeah. Well, I also kind of want to answer the last question too. Sorry about that. But I helped organize the People's Climate March and organized almost 1,000 people from DC with a bunch of now activists in DC that had never worked on environmental advocacy or anything like that. And we got all these buses from DC to New York. And I just had an incredible moment the day of the march with the 10 women, all of them women, who had been working with me on getting our people from DC to New York and getting sponsorships of nonprofits and companies and things like that in DC of the march. And just being able to hear the number 400,000 people march today for action on climate change was really powerful. And Brown prepared me because I think both prepared me and did not prepare me by its community. So the community of Brown, I was surrounded by people who were so passionate about what they cared about that they would go through so many hours to make the weirdest course on I don't know, Native American sculpture. It was crazy subjects that we did not have courses on already, and they would really devote themselves to this. Or people who started clubs, or people who started some people even started their own companies or startups here at Brown. The community here really inspired me to take that challenge and do something that I cared about. At the same time, now that I work with people all the time, work with communities, not having the pushback on your ideas, and then going out of that to straight to Texas and North Carolina, the last two campaigns I worked on was really hard and well, really worthwhile, but also just, people are not 100% with you on climate change, but the whole gamut, and that has been a challenge.
So Brown certainly, as I mentioned before, gave me an opportunity to, in effect, to develop a marketable skill as a liberal arts major, to develop a skill in public opinion polling and market research by doing an independent study project that led to a summer job with a national polling firm. So in that way, it was terrific. I think there's some things it didn't prepare me for, but I'm not sure it's the fault of the university. It's just maybe how life and careers evolve. For the last 20-some years, I've been in a management position, several different management positions, running organizations or parts of organizations. So I've had to do a lot of managing of people, and I've had to do budgets, and I've had to get quite involved in finance, and I didn't take any courses in any of things like that at Brown or really get exposed to that. So it's something I've learned kind of on the job. If I had to take some kind of graduate degree program right now, I think it might be in finance, because when you run a nonprofit, you're running a business. And when you're running a nonprofit that's focusing on development, you need to understand the development process, which is very complicated financially, especially urban redevelopment. So I would, I don't know if I could have taken courses at Brown that would have fully prepared me for that, but it's something I'm still interested in refining my skills on.
Thanks. Okay, so thinking about maybe going back to this theme of different ways in which you might pursue these goals and different types of environments that you might work in. My question's for DR and Sophie, who I think have both thought a good amount about this, and it's how do you think about the trade-offs between different sorts of environmental careers, different cultures that you might work in, different types of work you might be doing? Maybe how have you thought about that? How have you navigated that yourself? How have you navigated that yourself, and how do you see other people navigating that? Good.
So I've worked for 2 for-profits, 2 nonprofits, and 1 family-run startup. And I think they're all very different types of cultures and places to work. I think that, part of any job that you have after college, your first couple of jobs, is obviously about thinking, I think, how can you build and add to your skill set. So I think that, you can learn a lot in a startup because it's really fast paced, and one day you might be the communications manager and the next day you're doing sales, and the third day you're doing something else, and that can be really exciting. And if you're sort of well positioned there, you can really grow and learn a lot. But I sort of like a little more structure. I like having now in my new job, we set performance goals, and you have performance check-ins, and I kind of like the little more structured type of performance development versus kind of learn as you go, figure it out. But there's no one right way. I think those are just some of the things that you should think about. I also think having a really good manager means everything. My first job out of college, even though we were a big company, I had 6 bosses in like 5 months. It was really kind of hectic and crazy. But at GW, where I was for 3.5 years, I'm still close to my boss there. She was wonderful. You can't predict that. You can't always know that when you join. But I think it's something to ask when you're assessing a place. What's your management style? Do you do performance reviews? How long have people worked here? You can sort of ask the question without asking it. I also use LinkedIn to speak to former employees of the place I'm working now. You can search for like past company name, and I found some people who I was able to reach out to and speak to and get the sort of off the record lowdown, if you will. So that's sort of more how to assess any kind of work environment. And I think, do you like large? Do you want to like know everybody you're working with? Do you want to sort of have a really cool core small team, but be working in a really big place? So I think these are just more kinds of the questions and things that I thought about, and I certainly didn't think about that with my first job. Each job I've had, I sort of asked like one more question. It's like, oh, I wish I had asked this before I took this job. But I think that just doing as much homework as you can. I mean, I've asked to speak to current employees before accepting an offer. And if a company won't let you do that, maybe that's a sign of something. Maybe it's not, but try to find as many people you can to talk to before you join a place. And I think that's, sort of maybe the other trade-offs, I think for me personally are just, in any job, it's what skills are you developing, what's your boss gonna be like, what's your work life sort of balance going to be, what type of work will you be doing, what's your opportunity to grow there or to grow from that position to somewhere else.
Fred, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So the question is about thinking about trade-offs of working in different parts of the field or different company cultures, different size companies. I guess just different factors that you might consider.
Okay, so everything Sophie said. I think if you care about the environment and you want to work in a field that's related somehow to the environment very, very broadly, I sort of see it as a three-legged stool. There's sort of the business, capital market side, there's the policy, activism side, and then I guess maybe activism belongs to the nonprofits, but sort of somewhere in there you can sort of work one of three ways. I think Brown is very good at showing you pathways for those second two. It's not necessarily great at showing you a pathway to how to intersect with business and the environment. And so I think it's really important to take internships and talk to people. So I know that's nothing new that you probably haven't heard before, but it's really hard to know without asking the great questions that Sophie just suggested, what it's like to work with a company in a specific field without talking to people who have worked there and or working in that field specifically. There are lots of different trade-offs between small companies, large companies, where you are in sort of that three-legged stool, and then I don't want to get too deep in the metaphor, but like as you go up the stool, like there's different, different ways you can intersect with the work environment there, but you got to ask yourself questions, and you got to take internships to figure out, do I like working in small companies? Do I like working in large companies? I worked for a 50-person company before my current one, and it was good. It was a good size. You sort of know everybody. I wouldn't want to work in a much larger company, but I didn't know that until I worked in a 50-person company. Now I work in a 5-person company. It feels a little small sometimes, but you don't know that until you do it. So and going back to Brett's first question around a piece of advice, I wouldn't stress too much about your first couple internships, your first couple jobs. It takes a while to build up the experience. If you think back, you graduate when you're 22, say you retire when you're 65, you have roughly 42 years of work experience. If you think about a career as being 7 years, which at this point in today's life and age, that's actually a pretty long career at a certain place. You can have 6 different careers in your life. If you go shorter, you can have double that. So don't stress about it too much and try to just take chances and see what's fun. And there will always be more chances as long as you ask yourself, why am I doing this? And is it help further my aspirations in some aspect?
I just wanted to add one quick thing. I think it's also, I know I struggle with this sort of, what is a sustainability job? How do you search for them? Because some are sustainability, like they have it in the name, but that's kind of the exception, I would say. So I would say another way to think about it is, what functional role might you want to fill in an organization that's doing work that you are passionate about. So for example, let's say you love communications work. You could work for any one of the major or smaller sort of you can work for a company that does a lot with sustainability. You can work for a nonprofit that does a lot with sustainability. So that's just another way to think about your skill set. Don't like searching for the perfect sustainability manager job can be challenging. But if you say, well, I really like Environmental Defense Fund, and they have a job in the community, they have a job in this kind of shared services department. I'll be working on press releases related to all of the really fascinating work that goes on here. That's a foot in the door. Yes, transitioning can sometimes be challenging, but think about your skill set and see where that can be applied. You can also, though, think about the other way. I want a sustainability manager position. How do I make that happen as well? But don't be afraid of taking a job that's in a functional role you're not sure you're that interested in, but if the organization is great, that's a good way to kind of navigate your career that way as well.
To the point about figuring out, what is it like to work in a specific company in a specific part of the three-legged stool, whether you're on the X or Y axis there. There's one other thing which I think people don't talk about a lot, which is tremendously helpful, and that is you could take leave from Brown. I took a whole year off in between my sophomore and junior year, and I spent pretty much the whole time working, but which might not sound like very much fun, but I was doing some field organizing. That was really a really interesting experience. And then for the second half of the year, I was living in Providence, and so I was paying next to nothing for rent. I was working a full-time job, but didn't have any commitments outside of that, so I got to hang out with my friends at Brown all the time. I sat in on a GISP, and that was actually a full year of really understanding what it is like to work in specific positions on some of this. So obviously Brown doesn't want everyone to go around saying take as much time off as you can, but I'll say it. So and to, like Sophie said earlier about doing your due diligence, I did one lesson I learned pretty hardcore from that year was that you really should ask all these questions ahead of time. And so if I had sat down and spoke with everyone in the organization that I worked for during that time ahead of time, I'm not sure that I wouldn't have done it, but I definitely would have gone into it with my eyes wide open as to a few things that were different than I'd expected. So I have one more question for the panelists, and then we'll turn it over completely to questions from all of you. And this question is for Rachel and Tom. And I'm wondering, thinking about where our society is today, and how things have been evolving, both in terms of the environment and sustainability, but also broader trends you see going on related to the workforce and careers and how people figure out what they want to do and what's needed. What do you think are the most significant trends? What do you think people should be paying attention to or thinking about that are going to be really big factors moving forward that maybe haven't been as big in the past? I'm trying to ask really easy questions.
That was not an easy question. So I'll answer a couple of them. And Deanna and I were talking about this. Clean tech actually in the investment community is a dirty word. My last round of fundraising, we did not use that term. It has been largely a financial misfire in the marketplace. Billions of dollars went in very early and millions have come out. Primarily because we are, as expressed very early on, we're fundamentally changing the infrastructure of our nation and the world, which is not as easy as building yik-yak. And so I think, as you think about the problems that we're trying to solve, they're so much larger, and from a venture-backed company perspective, the patience that's typically put into those type of endeavors is much more challenging. And so in many cases we I think are doing well by doing good, but I think in many cases we're not wearing green on our sleeves as much as we did in the past. Our customers, for instance, these grumpy facility managers, actually get rewarded for saving money. And that money goes back to paying their salaries, driving profit, or helping the business go forward. Oftentimes, though, the press release comes out about how they did it solely to save trees and take cars off the road. So I think in terms of what's happening, I think there is a sort of a large move The number of EVs are coming out, the number of folks that are biking or walking to work, the increased resurgence of public transportation, the inevitable move to all of these wasteful lights you see here to LED is going to happen. But I think it's going to happen sort of more quietly than many of the marches would lead you to believe. I think the second one, in terms of how careers develop, I think many of us are pounding our on the table about internships, and we just sort of counsel a couple things. An internship is about what you can do for the company, not what the company can do for you. So if you're a mechanical engineer, I'd like to hear about how you can design a part for me, not how I can teach you how to use SolidWorks. If you are a writer, I don't want to teach you how to write. I want you to have already looked at my blog and have 4 new ideas. And I think that last one leads to the thing. I am amazed by how many students come into my office and have no friggin' idea what I do. I am very transparent. I looked up all these people before I got here. I LinkedIn each of them before I got here. You could very quickly find out I'm a cyclist. You could have read every one of my blogs. You could have figured out the funding of our entire company. You probably could have guessed the valuation of my stock. But I continually have people walk in here into my company and ask me what I do and what I'm looking for. I'd rather you walk in and tell me something interesting about my company and what's in your experience set for you can do for me. And I think those are the types of interns that really make a difference. And one last point around the taking time off. One of the problems with folks that sort of liberal education folks is that your period of time to do an internship is very, very small. It tends to be 8 or 10 weeks in the middle of summer. Oftentimes you want to take a couple weeks off to go hang out with your friends. That is not very useful to the company. So there's 2 things that can happen. One is you could think about what project you could do and complete in that time frame, and maybe even work longer than 40 hours during those times to help complete that. The second is you can do exactly what Brett said, is maybe take a semester off and commit yourself to an endeavor. And that's one of the things, one of our main sources of internships happens to be Northeastern, because those kids can take 6 months off and oftentimes are in Boston and work part-time after that. So as you think about using internships, which are really, as we've all said here, one of the big entrees into careers, understand how you are adding value versus how you are deriving value. You will get that by adding value, but that's really the way that we think about folks that come to work for us.
Thank you for going first. Yeah, I echo a lot of what you said there. And I had written down earlier essentially what Tom just said, this sort of ask not what this company can do for you, but what you can do for this company, nonprofit or not. I had written the same thing. It's just to say, while you are using these internships to figure out what is sparking you and what you're good at, remember that you are holding in your hands and minds my mission, their bottom line, my bottom line, their mission, all that. It's so important to us that if you fulfill your obligations as you experiment, the experience will be better. And I had also just jotted down, if it is not, if you have chosen something that is clearly incompatible with you, then speak to your person, whoever your person is, and figure it out. I would actually rather you leave in the middle with my respect for not doing a terrible job for the second half because you hate it and can verbalize why, than have you just stay and take up this and take up the space of someone who will both love it while they're experimenting. So I agree with that completely. But as far as the trends go, what I see is a trend toward understanding the need for the poles in addressing environmental issues. So we have been working on marine debris. Everyone kind of agrees it's bad. And then everyone starts fighting after that. Yeah, they'll agree it's bad, but then everyone starts fighting about whose fault it is and who should fix it, But what I learned then working on a marine protected area this summer, there's a proposal to close Cash's Ledge, so you can read about it, but we worked on a very specific conservation environmental problem. And we learned how there's a place for the tree and fish huggers chained to the piece of nature they want to protect and the sea shepherds. And there is a place for big money, high investing that's trying to do the same thing a different way. There's a place for the regulators. Something that came up in a discussion last night is we need environmental lawyers and people to represent the regulatory side who can lobby effectively and make some rules and bills that will help. Just as we need the people who aren't quite Sea Shepherd, but in between the bills and the Sea Shepherd people, working on the ground with people and with the stuff, whatever the stuff is, bringing experiences from the field back to connect it with the people. And what I remember, Brown, I was also in Bolt, and but I tried to study art semiotics and ended up with sort of underwater archaeology and anthropology, and I wasn't necessarily immersed in what would be considered the environmental movement, but I was into recycling and all that. And I have to say, I think there really is this trend of needing to recognize and starting to recognize the poles, and that we need people from one side to the other, all ultimately working for the same thing, a planet that lives on, that has biodiversity, that isn't full of trash and no predators. And I think that's a good trend. I think it's important, because just tree huggers aren't going to do it, and just big business isn't going to do it.
All right, great. So now we're going to open it up to questions. I think in some places, at least, this panel was advertised at ending at 11:15. So if anyone needs to go now, please feel free to head out. But the whole issue here with when Jim told me that we were going to have 6 people on the panel, I was a little incredulous because that's a lot of people. But obviously they cover so many different perspectives. Hopefully you all found it as enlightening as I have. We'll probably do like 10 minutes of questions or so, and then I think there's a pretty open schedule for the next chunk of time in the JanLab schedule, so you all can come up and ask people questions individually if those aren't getting filled in the group. So, who wants to kick it off? No one? Okay.
So some of you have mentioned this, like what you majored or concentrated in, and I'm wondering how you feel that decision affected your career or didn't affect your career.
It had no effect on my career. Do something you love.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So I majored in political science because I thought that was a really interesting topic, but I knew I didn't want to go into a career in political science. I knew I wanted to go into finance or business somehow. So I made sure I took classes that would reflect that, I could do math, that I could work in the business world. But the broad degree has no impact in my experience.
Yeah, I would say, that being studying, English is not directly relevant to what I do now. I will say for me, it's amazing how many people out there in the real world can't construct a sentence. And so I think that, writing is obviously a fundamental is a fundamental skill that you're learning here, and don't take that for granted. Not everybody can write, and so just writing it doesn't have to be writing research reports, but just constructing sentences, I think is a really valuable skill. And I think, in anything you're concentrating in here, critical thinking, problem solving, analysis, all of those can be translated to any number of fields. So, second what's been said, all the classes I wanted to take were in the, English department. I wish I had taken more. I took Econ 11 as a senior, which was really hard. But I think take an econ class, maybe take a finance class. Take a couple slightly maybe more like pre-professional type of courses. I wish I had done a little bit more of that, but don't regret majoring in what I majored in.
I studied international relations and comparative literature, and actually I agree. The subjects were not like what I work on now, or aren't really related to environmental work. But doing a research project with a professor in my junior and senior year, and that kind of like long devotion to a project and to writing on my own making my own hours for that and the whole thing, I think helped with my ability to work.
I majored in political science, and I think it helped somewhat. I've been involved in politics and government my whole career, and gave me some basic grounding in how the system operates, the different constituencies, the different pressures on politicians and all. So I think it was of some help. It wasn't necessarily the biggest factor in shaping my career, but it was helpful. And the independent studies I did, both the one I mentioned before, and then I also had an independent study where I was working for a state senator. Those were very helpful in giving me kind of the real world perspective on what I was learning in my political science courses.
I guess I have a sort of unusual situation. For me, everything I did kind of helps me now, but that's because I'm really designing everything I'm doing now. That I get to make most all the decisions. I think there'll be a time when I'm really not the only one driving this. I kind of hope that happens because we've grown. But the only course I wish I took was statistics, but I never would have known that back then. That just simply didn't become clear to me until I started overseeing our own science projects and realized it would be handy just to have that in my own back pocket ready to go. But that's why I have good interns.
Okay, so I'm remembering that I've taken a few classes in this classroom, and I don't think anyone should have to sit still in here for more than an hour and 20 minutes. So let's just wrap it up now, and then you can ask questions individually. I'm going to invite Jim up to make a couple quick announcements, and then we'll break.
All right,
Can I say one quick thing?
Quick panel.
Sorry, Jim, before you make a statement, just one quick thing. I know we're talking a lot about what's life after Brown, and that can be stressful. Most important thing, I think, is to have fun. My job, I work really hard in it because it's fun, because it's interesting. I like it, enjoy it, make sure whatever you decide to do, that is fun. If it's not fun, you're in the wrong career.
And can I play off of that just for a sec? I think it's important to, when you're looking at a job, maybe not so much your first job, but as you get a little further into your career, to look at who are the people you're going to be working with. I think that is as important as the content of the job, especially if you're working for a small organization. I think most of us want to be in an environment where we're thriving because of the people we're working with, as opposed to being stifled or frustrated by the people we're working with. So, to the extent you can evaluate that, that I think is critical.
All right. So in addition to rushing the stage after we have 2 more shots at talking to these awesome alum. You can come to lunch at the faculty club. So a bunch of you registered early for JanLab. Who registered early for JanLab? So you're in for lunch. You have no barriers to being in for lunch. However, there's going to be a few spots left open. So if you showed up at the faculty club between 12 and 12:15, you have a pretty good chance of getting in, getting a free meal, getting to chat a little bit more with Elon. And then finally, they'll be doing small group sessions later today at J. Walter Wilson. If you wanted to sign up to do any individual meetings with each of these alums, come grab me, and we can just sign you up so you can talk to them a little bit later. And then everybody is welcome to the closing ceremony at 3:30 in Alumni Hall. That's it. Go get it.